Dr. Kreider, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I want to thank the Planning Committee for giving me the privilege of coming here today and talk with you about something that I'm very passionate about, which is end-of-life care. It's hard to, I guess, initially understand why someone would be passionate about dying, and I'll get to that in a moment, but I'm really honored to be here. You know, I think I was destined to be here. My dad's been deceased almost 30 years, and when he died very suddenly, after about 2 or 3 years, my mother took all the home videos. Back then they were 8mm movies, so they're antiques. She took them and put them on a DVD for us to view, and I had never seen them until about 4 years ago. I just kind of tucked it away, and so when I got the thing out 4 years ago and looked at it, and by the way, I grew up in Austin, went to that other school over there, and I knew that was coming. Much to my surprise, about every third minute of that DVD was the Corps cadets marching down Congress Avenue, and probably another 20 minutes of reveille. And this went on for about 4 hours of DVD. I think 3 hours was the Corps cadets marching and reveille. So I think my dad wanted me to be an Aggie at some point. So when I tell my mother that I have the privilege of presenting to Aggies, she just beams. So thanks for letting me make my mother very happy today. It's good to be here. Anybody in here had a family that's had a hospice experience? Good. What do you remember about it? Do you remember anything at all about it?
I know that it really helped, like, our family deal with it. It was, you know, like, I guess, like, in a holistic manner. We reached out to each family member. I mean, my parents and the grandchildren, and I think everybody involved, and just kind of helped us go through the process. Great.
I'm glad you had a good experience. Others? Who else?
Well, my mom is under hospice care right now.
Wow.
At home. And the biggest impact that I'm seeing and happy about is that my dad has because he was a full-time
caregiver. Right. We're going to talk today about hospice care in general. I'll talk a little bit about cancer because I know that this is a class on disease. I'll talk about other diseases as well. So if I do my job right, let me tell you first of all a little bit about about Hospice Brazos Valley. We are the largest rural hospice in Texas. We serve 17 counties, 9,000 square miles. We served almost 900 patients last year. We have offices in Brenham, LaGrange, and Bryan. Our annual budget's about $7.7 million. It's important, one of the things especially because this is a class on disease and how to address that and treat that, I want to point out to you specifically that our average patient length of stay is 58 days, and we'll talk about why that's important, especially in terms of cancer care. We've been around for about 20 years. We've served almost 10,000 patients, so we're beginning to have a significant impact in the areas that we serve. If I do my job right today, there are 3 things I'd like you to take away from this presentation. I hope that you will be able to articulate what hospice care is, and I want to talk a lot today about palliative medicine. That is going to be something that's very, very important. I think especially in your generation, as your parents continue to age and even some of your older siblings, or as we all age, you'll see in a moment, palliative care is going to be a very important part of what we do. I want to talk about how hospice is a part of palliative medicine. There are significant myths about hospice care that I'd hope that you can identify and basically do away with. I'd like you to be able to leave this room today and tell your friends, if the conversation ever comes up, if that's a myth, you can identify it and basically blow it out of the water. And then I do want to talk briefly about our role in cancer care. And then I want to leave you with hopefully a different perspective on health. Because one of the things that's kind of profound for me when I go to work every day is I think I've learned most about health from people who are dying. And I'll say some more about that in a moment. Before I do, I want to honor these 4 people. I used to be a Lutheran, I still am a Lutheran pastor. I used to be a pastor at a local congregation, and these 4 people who are in your department were my members. And I'm a better person and leader because they influenced my life. So I think some of them are here, so thank you very much for what you've done for me. I understand, though, that 2 of them are in the what I understand is the PAP side. And they tell me that they're the fun people. And the people on the other side are kind of stuffy and on the dark side. So I'll let you make that decision since you get to study with them every day. So the question is, why even be concerned about end-of-life care, especially since death is really just a normal part of life in many ways. In your generation, you're going to have to deal significantly with the cost of end-of-life care as well as how that care should be delivered. By 2013, 20% of the population in this country will be over 65 years of age. That is significant. And most of those people will die from a chronic illness. I'll talk a little bit more about what I think people, how they expect to die or how they expect to end their lives and the kind of challenges we have in meeting those expectations. I think all of us would like to just simply die in our sleep. But the truth of the matter is that most of us will age, will then have some type of chronic illness for many years and then meet our end. And so that how we address that, how we care for ourselves and people that we love as we make our way toward the end of life's journey is very important. 95% of Medicare expenses occur in the last 6 months of a patient's life. And this is what's causing the great debate today in our country about health care reform. Now stop and think about that. 95% of all Medicare expenses occur in the last 6 months of life. And what we know in many cases, or in some cases, that the treatment that people receive at the end of their life is not helpful. And people experience treatment that not only it doesn't help their condition, but it may exacerbate it in some cases. And it certainly is very costly. So it is an important issue. In this state, in 2009, I haven't seen the 2010 figures yet, almost half of all deaths and 60% of Medicare deaths occurred on hospice. Remember that to be eligible for Medicare, generally you have to be 65 years of age or older. And typically, Medicare is the primary health benefit for that individual. There may be a supplement to support that as well. In the United States, 42% of all deaths and almost half of Medicare deaths were hospice patients. And the reason I share that with you is to let you know is that we are a significant part of health care. We are no longer a volunteer movement. We're no longer kind of on the fringe of health care. We are a significant part of what goes on in this country in treating disease. However, we are still the best kept secret in healthcare. And that's one of the things I hope to leave with you today is that when you leave here, you're the people we need to talk to. We don't need to talk to the 65-year-olds or the 80-year-olds. We need to talk to you so that as you need this care when you age or when the loved ones that you have aged, you will know that hospice is a good alternative or at least a good supplement to the kind of care that we typically have in this country. I want to talk about disease progression a bit because it's very important to what we do and it also governs kind of the future of hospice care in this country. We call this the Intervention Timetable, and if you consider, Dr. Crowder, where is that pointer? Here it is. If you consider this end of the spectrum, this is basically where disease is diagnosed. And at the top of this triangle is where curative treatment takes place. Now, if you notice that the end of this process is going to be death, and for hospice care, I'll talk about this later, there is bereavement after death. But the point I want to make here, especially if the disease that's identified is chronic, we need to start talking about end-of-life care here and not wait till we get to here to talk about what the patient wants. One of the crises we have in healthcare today is that we're really good scientists. Any aspiring medical students in here? Anybody going to med school? Okay. Physicians are remarkable scientists today, and you know, science is what makes doctors really good at what they do in terms of being able to diagnose disease and treat it. The problem is, at least as my experience in hospice care, has been that many physicians don't talk about a plan of care. Okay, you have this disease, we're going to try to cure you, which is great, and I tell my medical students, whatever you do, don't stop trying to cure people. But the problem is that doctors sometimes don't talk to their patients about why they're doing what they're doing. They just simply say, okay, here's the best regimen for you in terms of cancer treatment. And we're going to do this, and often they don't talk with patients about what is it that you actually want to accomplish. What are the goals of care in this treatment of cancer, for example? Surely one of the goals is to cure that disease, but there are other things that go with it. What kind of quality of life do you want to have while you're getting this cure or treatment? Now, as the disease progresses, you can see this part of the figure gets smaller and smaller, and at some point, what we would call palliative medicine takes over. And palliative medicine, well, let me do it this way. Anybody here from Cameron County? Anybody here from Williamson County? May I ask you, if you went to the doctor, you had symptoms, and the doctor said you have 6 months left to live, what would you do? What would be your major concerns? Okay, family. Anything else that comes to mind? Have any debt? School debt, school loans? Yeah, pay those off maybe somehow, deal with those? Okay, all right. So family concerns. How about the rest of it? If you had 6 months left to live, what would you do? Plan your funeral? What else? Anybody party? Party hardy for 6 months, okay? How you answer the question, what would you do, is the foundation for quality of life, because how you define that quality is what we would hope to be able to address in hospice care. What we're arguing in hospice medicine today is that that conversation ought to take place before the patient's terminal. And that as people become more and more chronic in their disease, the doctor needs to know, physician needs to know, what is it that you want to accomplish in your life? And how can I help you accomplish that by the kind of treatment that we give you? Why is this so important? Because when we see people that have been chronically ill for years come to us in hospice, what we discover is that their physicians and their families have operated in silos. The general practitioner has not talked to the specialist has not talked to the therapist, the physical therapist. And so when they come to us, one of the things that we have to do is kind of unpack what it is they want to accomplish, provide hospice care, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the point here is we've got to start talking about chronic illness and plans of care and what does the patient want to achieve in terms of quality of life before they're ever terminal. And that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, for medicine in the next decade. All right, so what is end-of-life care? It's treatment, and I want to say to you that hospice care is more than holding hands. It is something that we do. It is a treatment like curative treatment. It's simply we're not curing the patient, we're treating symptoms. It begins when the patient has said, you know what, I just don't think I want to go through any more curative treatment because the chemo is making me sicker than a dog, and when I'm that sick, I can't hold my grandchildren. Prime example, we had a cancer patient in Madisonville. He'd ranched on this ranch for 40 years, and so we went in to be his caregiver and said, what do you want to accomplish in life that you have left to live? And he said, you know what I want to do? I want you, and he was in a lot of pain, I want you to get my pain under control so that every Friday afternoon I can sit out in my barn on the hay with my buddies who I've done for the last 30 years and drink beer together. And so we got him his pain under control. We got him, he walked again. He could walk out to the barn. The volunteers in our program brought the beer. And we helped him accomplish his goal. He said, I don't want that treatment anymore. Our goal is to enhance quality of life. How do you want to live your life? That's what we're after. It always has a pain management component. I will tell you that the other thing that happens in this country today is that too many people die in pain. There is no reason why people should be in pain in the hospital, in their homes. It just should not happen. And so pain management is a very, very important thing of part of what we do. The physician, the patient's in charge. The patient says to us, this is how I would like to be treated in terms of this is the kind of pain that I want or don't want. We have patients my mother's age, she's 84. They refuse to take their pain medication because all their lives they've not taken medicine. My mother didn't grow up with good health care. I mean, she grew up on a farm in Williamson County, and you know, they didn't have health care. They didn't go to the doctor all the time. And so medicine for her is something that's kind of taboo. And so she would be one of these people, I think, that would refuse to take her pain medication because she might get addicted to it, you know. So who knows? And there's always a primary caregiver involved, someone to make sure that the patient is safe. Now, what I want to say to you here is that notice that end-of-life care is not just for terminal illness. End-of-life care begins when we begin to decline in relation to our illness. So it doesn't have to be simply terminal illness. It can be any kind of chronic illness where we have begun to decline, but we're not going to die in 6 months. And so this is a highfalutin definition of palliative care. Treatment that enhances comfort, improves the quality of life. We don't exclude anything that might help the patient. That includes radiation, for example, if you're a cancer patient, and we can radiate your tumors to relieve your pain. That could be palliative treatment. The important part about this is that everybody's in agreement as to what we're going to accomplish. The physician, the patient, the primary caregiver, the medical team, we all sit down and say, what do we want to happen, or what are the outcomes going to be? I want to be free of pain so I can go to my granddaughter's wedding. I want to be able to play golf one more time with the guys I've played basketball with. We want to make sure that life is enhanced. And so what I'd like you to understand is that palliative care and hospice, it's about living life. So how do we help patients live life as best we can with this terminal illness? Now, hospice care is a subset of palliative medicine. And it simply means that hospice care then is palliative care for people who do not wish curative treatment and have a prognosis of 6 months or less to live. It's that 6 months prognosis that gets people on hospice care. Now let me say to you, we've had patients on our service for as long as 4 years. How can that be? Well, the way that Medicare defines it, because Medicare is the one who pays for it, is that if with each disease that we diagnose or come to us diagnosed, if that patient continues to show a decline, they may stay on hospice care. If you know anything about congestive heart failure, for example, it's a very, very slow decline. Our congestive heart failure patients, usually they go along for quite a few months, and then they crater, and they kind of rise to another plateau and go along some more, and they crater again, and they've cratered from one point to here, but it's a very slow decline, so they can stay on for 4 years. There's other good news. You live longer on hospice. That's something people usually don't know. It's one of the myths I'd like you to take away from here. So the whole point of hospice and palliative medicine is to focus on the whole person. Right now, medicine does a great job with the physical aspects of the person. What we're trying to teach our medical students, again, is to reclaim these other three things: emotional, social, and spiritual aspect of a person's humanity. In hospice care, we've done that for years. That's what we believe makes the care so good. You're beginning to see some of this with cancer oncologists. They're beginning to employ social workers and put others around their patients, who, even as they seek to cure people. So the whole person is very important, that we treat the whole person in this treatment. Here's how it becomes very, very a focus for us, is that every patient we have has a team. There's the patient. The primary caregiver, again, is there to make sure the patient is safe, to make sure that the plan of care is executed. We typically nurses visit twice a week, unless the plan of care says we need to do something different. You can be on hospice care and not have a primary caregiver. There are patients that I take to med school sometimes that you would never know they're on hospice, because they're ambulatory, they're independent, they're still working. And so if you're like that, you may stay on hospice care until you reach a point where the decline is such you can no longer take care of yourself. Many years ago, we had a patient who lived in a box. He was homeless. And he came to us referred from a local clinic, and so his home was a box. And so we went to his home, and the nurses met him there and did their care for him there, and he lived there in that box until he could no longer care for himself, and so we had to move him to a nursing home. But wherever you call home, that's where we're going to treat you. The physician is very important in this. The physician obviously is the one who has to certify the patient is terminal. There's a nurse, typically an RN. There's a healthcare aide. I would argue that the healthcare aide is probably the most important part of this team because you will tell things to the person who bathes you that you will not tell your doctor. And so the aides, when we team our patients every Wednesday morning here in Bryan, the healthcare aides have to be there because they know things about patient care that we would never know without them. Social workers there take care of social needs, making sure that the will's in place, that everything's in order in terms of relationships. We had a patient 3 years ago who was on her way from California to go back to Mexico. Her goal was to die at home in Mexico. She was undocumented, and that doesn't matter to us at all. If you need care, we're going to care for you. She got to Bryan and basically had cratered, and so we talked with her, and she said, you know, I really would like to die at home. I want my parents to be with me when I died. And I don't know how our social workers did it, but they found her parents in southern Mexico and got them up to her bedside the day before she died. Okay, that's what the social workers do. Chaplains, I will tell you that dying is a spiritual exercise. When you have a terminal illness, you ask significant questions like, what has been the purpose of my life? What does God think about me? How are my relationships? Will I be remembered when I'm gone? Those are all spiritual questions, and so our chaplains help people work through those questions. We are not a faith-based organization. We're not going to proselytize. If you're a humanist, if you're an atheist, if you're Roman Catholic, if you're Lutheran, we're going to meet you where you are and provide the spiritual care that you need as you define it. Volunteers are our value-added service. As I mentioned, the volunteer brought the beer. I can't tell you, one of my other favorite stories, we had another liver cancer patient. He had not walked for 8 months. He was in so much pain. We got him home. We got his pain under control. It took us about a week. Still not out of bed. And so he told the volunteer one day that he really wanted a dog. So the volunteer went down to the local pound and picked up a dog and brought it to the patient's home. Put the dog on the bed for the patient, and the dog wouldn't stay on the bed. So the next thing we know, the patient gets out of bed for the first time in 8 months and walks to the front porch of his home, picks up the dog, sits in his chair, and greets his neighbors on the porch. That's quality of life. That's hospice. Symptoms under control. His plan of care, I just want to hold that dog and sit on the front porch and watch my neighbors. Bereavement counselors, dying's a very sad thing. It's a very hard thing, and so we help families through their bereavement issues, their grief process, even before the patient dies. The patients have bereavement issues. I'm losing my identity, I'm losing my way of life, I'm losing my family, and so we have counselors who help patients work through that, and then we follow the patient's family for 13 months. We have support groups for them. We have, you may have seen the paper, I guess you read the paper, I don't know, maybe you don't. My med school students don't, but we have had a rash of trisomy 18 births in this community, and we've had the privilege of serving 5 of them. And we put together a Play Baby Play group for them in our bereavement program where the parents who had lost the children came and held the children that they had that were still with us. Yesterday the social worker told me and the bereavement counselor told me that they had an Easter egg hunt last night, and we hid the Easter eggs all over the yard of our bereavement house, and in each Easter egg they put a part of a poem. And so as they collected the eggs and got back that evening in the living room of this house, they put all the parts of the poem together and read it. It was about children. It's really profound. Okay, that's the kind of stuff that we do to help families and patients grieve and be whole as they are going through their life experience. Now, again, it's about the whole person. It's not just about you as a physical. It's not just about the disease. It's about you as a whole person. And we notice that we treat wherever you live. 85% of people in this country want to die in their home. And yet only about half of them make it, which tells you a lot about the healthcare system, is that we're not doing a very good job of meeting patients' needs in terms of where they'd like to die and complete their lives. So we go to homes, nursing homes, assisted living facilities. We do have to provide care sometimes in a hospital setting because some of our patients have pain or symptom issues that we can't control in their home, and so we put them in the hospital. I'm pleased to say that we're about to open a 6-bed facility that we're going to basically manage ourselves. It'll be very family-oriented, very residential, and we can then place our patients in that setting and care for them as they need to be cared for. For example, young men, in this case 46 years of age, 35 to 50, who have had drug abuse issues, their pain tolerance is unbelievable. And you can't just give that kind of a patient, in most cases with certain diagnoses, you just can't give them the normal morphine or other methadone that we use as well for pain. You can't do it. They just don't process it the same physiologically. And so we have to put them in the hospital sometimes and increase their dose of methadone or morphine to be able to control their pain. So most of our patients are not afraid of dying. They're afraid of dying in pain. And so that's why pain management is so crucial. When my staff go, I'm going to visit a woman who came to my med school class last week when I leave here today, take her to thank you gift. And the first thing I'm going to ask her is, how's your pain? When chaplains go, how's your pain? When social workers go to visit, how's your pain? And if we find that the patient has not got their pain under control, then we get on the phone and call the nurse and say, you need to come and see Mrs. Smith, please, because she's having pain. It's all about pain and symptom management. Other kind of symptoms include nausea, constipation, vomiting. It tears your heart out when you see a patient have nausea and vomit for 32 straight hours. It's agonizing. And so that's the kind of stuff that we try to address. That's not a quality of life, I can assure you. Okay. Now, some people have this image at hospices, you hang the morphine drip and people are comatose. That is not what we do. We try to maintain the patient's independence. We want the patient to call the shots. Tell us what you want to accomplish. Tell us about your pain. And so the patient makes the choices and the decisions that then guide their care. And first thing is the kind of health care and medical treatment they want. The first decision is, do I want to stop the curative treatment? Advanced directives. In other words, usually it's a medical power of attorney telling your physician and your family what you want to accomplish, how you want to be treated. It's very important. In the state of Texas, medical power of attorneys are obligated under law to carry out the patient's wishes as the patient wants them to do that. There's a law being considered in the legislature as we speak that will give the physician the right to override that. And even hospitals and physicians are up in arms about all that. So it's very important. Why is estate planning so important? Why do you have to even bother about a will when you're dying? What's that got to do with quality of life? Yes?
If you don't have something in a will, doesn't it just go to like the government?
Well, yeah, if you, I guess technically it goes to the next of kin. It could be your spouse. But if you don't have any family, then the state gets it. So that's one issue. What are the other issues? I'm sorry, didn't you? And why does that bring you peace of mind? That's exactly right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I love my son, but I'm not sure I want him to be my power of attorney right now, my executor, you know? My daughter could handle that, I think, but I'm not sure my son could do that. Remember that we have a mantra in hospice care that people die the way they live. And, you know, the hospice care, the pain management and all that stuff, that's one thing, but dealing with family issues, that's a whole other issue. So, I mean, we've had patients' families try to change the will to get more of the will. So it's important. I mean, anybody. I'm very anal, frankly. I have a to-do list, and if I don't work my to-do list, I'm not comfortable. I wake up at 3 in the morning thinking, "Oh God, I forgot to do something." You know. Well, I know that when I'm when I'm at the end of my life, if things aren't in order, I'm not going to be comfortable. So something as basic as a will and what's going to happen to my stuff after I die is part of the quality of life. It's an issue that is very important to us. it needs to reflect patient attitudes about death. We have some patients, for example, they're younger, they have children, they don't want to die in the home because of the lingering memories, and so we will take that patient to the hospital as they begin the actively dying phase. There are some diseases that we need to be very cognitive of. For example, some cancers will cause patients to bleed out, and that's not a very pretty sight. And so we talk to the patients and families about their disease progression, what they can expect. One of the things that patients really want from us is they want to know, what's it going to be like for me when I die? And our nurses especially are profoundly competent in talking to families about what goes on physiologically when death occurs. You know, one of the biggest issues we face is if my loved one's not eating or drinking, are you starving my patient? Are you starving my loved one? And so we have a lot of conversation about nutrition and hydration. And why do you think that, what do you know about the body process that would make nutrition and hydration a big issue, other than just taking in energy? When you think about the physiology of it, why would that be an issue? Any ideas? The body, when death approaches, the body will systematically shut down organ systems. It will shut down an organ system so the energy can be transferred to another organ system to shut it down. And usually the last organ system that's addressed is the heart. Well, if you introduce food or water into that system as the body is shutting itself down, the body has to stop and go back and take care of that hydration and nutrition. And if you introduce food after the organ system is shut down, it's terribly painful. And so we talk a lot to our patients about the fact that you know, there's going to come a time when you're not going to want to eat and you're not going to want to drink anything, because that's exactly how the body dies, and that's okay. And we have to tell their families, we know you want to feed them because that's how we care for each other. It's called comfort food. And when we can't do anything, we feed ourselves. And so in hospice care, that can be a very detrimental thing to the dying process. It could exacerbate pain. And so we have to talk to the patients about that. We have to make sure that what we're doing for them in terms of the care reflects how they want to die. This all sounds, are you maybe 18 to 22 in here? That all sounds kind of really down, but the other thing our patients tell us is that you are the first people in the healthcare arena that's talked to us honestly about death and dying. And that is such a relief, because I'm not afraid anymore. I don't have to worry. I know what's going to happen. You can help me deal with the issues that I have. I mean, it even happens in families. We'll do an admission and the loved ones will tell our social worker, don't tell Dad, who's the patient, that he's dying, because he doesn't know. And the nurse who deals with the patient comes out of that admission process and tells the social worker, don't tell the family that Dad's dying, because they don't know. Okay, well, we know, and so we want to make sure that we're helping everybody deal honestly with what's going on in their care. Sound communication. Medical technology is remarkable today. I mean, we live in a remarkable age, and I'm glad that we do. For example, if a patient wants to use radiation to palliate pain, we'll do that. We didn't have that technique 20 years ago. Wonderful pharmacology now that we didn't have many years ago. So what kind of choices do patients want to make? So we create a plan that's very specialized, reflects every patient, that's unique. And here are the choices. Do you want your disease cured or not? How do you want to address that? How do we avoid premature death? How can we help maintain function? How can we keep you walking, whether it's to the front porch or the bathroom? How do we help you do that? How do we help prolong your life? What kind of suffering do you want to deal with? I mean, believe it or not, there are patients who won't take those pain medications, and it drives our nurses nuts. But that's how they choose to live their lives, and so we do the best we can to support that as long as they're not in danger. How do you define quality of life? Maintaining control is really important. If you've ever gone to the doctor or gone to the hospital with some other, some type of acute illness, you know how out of control you feel, because suddenly people are doing things with you and to you, and you're not in control anymore. You can't even push your own gurney or something. And so, end-of-life care can really seem like you're out of control. How do you define a good death? What is that? That's an oxymoron, isn't it? A good death. But how do you understand that? How do you want to? What's peace for you? And then how do we support your family and loved ones? Those are the choices that patients, we try to get them to make as part of their care. So hospice is about living life. It is about dying, I understand that, but it's about living life in terms of the amount of time that the patient has left to live. It's very specialized. We need to be doing more of it. Especially in terms of palliative care. It's aggressive pain management, always focuses on comfort. It's compassionate, looks at the whole person. It's team approach. We're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As I mentioned earlier, patients often live longer on hospice care. In fact, there's some really good research recently that indicates that if you take a person, two people with similar diagnoses, similar prognosis, and one person chooses, and neither of them seek curative treatment, but one is on hospice and the other is not, the one on hospice lives an average of 29 days longer than the one who doesn't. And it's paid for by Medicare, Medicaid, and most insurance companies. The hospice benefit is under Medicare Part A, which is the hospital benefit, which means that if, let's say that you're a cancer patient and you choose hospice care, that means that you can't go back into the hospital for treatment on that disease or that diagnosis. You can leave hospice anytime you want. Let's say that tomorrow they discover some remarkable cure for cancer. Then you could leave hospice and go take that treatment. Patients go on and off our service constantly for a lot of different reasons. And again, we will not turn anybody away. Hospice Brazos Valley, we're not profit, so we'll pay. If you have no way to pay for your service, that we don't care about that, we'll take you. Because the community supports our mission. Our indigent care last year was about $1 million. And it's gotten worse in the last 2 years because of the recession. People have lost their insurance. The other thing that hurts us is that people are not coming to us soon enough, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But people are delaying the decision to come onto hospice care because of the expense for them. For example, they may be in a nursing home, and we've had families who have delayed hospice. They don't want to put their loved one in hospice care because they don't understand it, and they want to keep the Medicare or the Social Security check, and that's hard to believe, but some people, that's all they have to live on. They take their grandmother into their home, and instead of going to a nursing home, they leave them there in the home and take the Social Security check and care for them the best they can. It's very difficult, but that's one of the realities that we face today. Okay, here's some of the myths. It's not about losing hope. I hope that you've kind of gleaned that from the presentation so far. We're talking about quality of life. And the other thing, since this is a class about disease, I just want to point out that we don't give in to the disease. We treat it palliatively. We take care of the symptoms. It's more than just hand-holding. It's active. It's comprehensive. A lot of people involved in it. It's not about hanging the morphine bag and comatose patients. That's not what we do. It's not religion-based, but it does address the truth, as I said, that dying is a spiritual exercise. And it's not just for the immediately dying. I want to talk with you a moment about that. As I mentioned to you earlier, our average length of stay, I think it said, was 58 days. So here's a patient who's been diagnosed as a prognosis of 6 months, 180 days. We only have them for 58. The bad news about that is that our median length of stay is only 9 days. So we have a lot of patients on our service that are on service for 2 days, 1 day. We've had patients die during the admission process. We do very well with any situation, but the best care we can provide is if we have the patient for a while, because we can surround them with a support team, get their pain under control, bring the social workers, the chaplains, the volunteers to the bedside, and that enhances quality of life. And so one of the things that we really want to talk about is how can we get people to come to hospice earlier? How do we destigmatize? And I know it's hard. Making the decision to go on hospice care is the most difficult thing a family can do. We understand that. But there's not a family that I have not talked to, especially when I was in the parish ministry. I would say to them, you know, this hospice thing you're going to do is going to be very, very difficult, but you will not regret a day of it. And to the person, they said, Pastor, this is the best thing that we ever did. Primarily because for the first time in those families' lives, they could really live life the way they wanted to. They quit putting off stuff. They actually were families. I mean, they engaged each other in ways that were really profound. And it's not just for cancer patients. So sooner is better. We'd love to have you for 180 days if you ever get sick, okay? Just want to point that out. All right. I know we're going to talk about cancer, but I wanted to point out that that's one of the myths, I think, about hospice care is it's just for cancer. It's not just for cancer. It's for any disease that's terminal. These are not in any order. They don't represent the highest percentages. I think that heart disease and pulmonary disease are the two highest non-cancer rates that we have. COPD is becoming an epidemic for us. We have, I can't tell you, when we team our patients, they'll say, no, I quit smoking 20 years ago. It still gets them. And it's hard. The other one that's going to overwhelm us is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's patients they're more challenging to care for, especially as the disease has progressed, because they can't tell us things. They can't communicate. You can't give them the pain scale. Rate your scale, pain on a scale of 1 to 10. That doesn't relate. And so we have to figure out their pain by their body movements, by other things. But every year the percentage of Alzheimer's patients increases in our census. It's going to be a tsunami for us. Failure to thrive is a fancy way of talking about getting old. It's just old age. You can't really point to any kind of diagnosis. The organs are just slowing down. It's just old age. HIV I'm pleased to say, has become less and less of an issue for us. We have fewer and fewer AIDS patients. ALS, we're seeing more of that, and then liver disease. Now, let's talk about cancer. I'll go back to this chart. We have made remarkable strides in cancer treatment in the last decade. It's unbelievable. And I think what you're going to see more and more is that oncologists are going to start doing palliative care with their patients while they're treating them. They're going to start treating their symptoms better. When you go for cancer treatment, they'll give you something for the nausea. They'll give you something for the diarrhea. They try to give you something that mitigates the side effects. But what more and more oncologists do, and I said earlier, is wrapping the psychosocial part of that. Getting social workers to help, talking to families, having the whole family make the decision about treatment, not just the patient. And so I think you're going to see that more and more cancer patients are going to have access to palliative care. Now, there are a lot of cancer patients who may not be terminal that would qualify for palliative medicine. Let's treat their symptoms, treat their pain. And so I hope that we're going to be further and further up the stream with cancer patients in terms of palliative medicine. Now, there are some things that are being specifically done for cancer patients. First of all, there's some debate about the possibility, and Medicare is thinking about this seriously, to extend the prognosis from 6 months to 12 months. The good news about that is that we could then have the patients longer. It wouldn't be so much of a death sentence, if you will. The bad news is doctors don't like to prognosticate that far out. And we have a hard time getting them to do a prognosis of 6 months, much less 12. And so, prognostication is not a science because, all the evidence-based medicine aside, we're all unique and we're all different. And so that's a very difficult challenge. But it would at least extend hospice care to those who may not be terminal. Healthcare reform has a new element to it that all children now that are enrolled in Medicaid or CHIP, they can get both curative cancer treatment plus hospice services, which is it's an excellent thing to do. There are demonstration projects in the Healthcare Reform Act that will allow us to give hospice care to people, and they can keep all their Medicare benefits, and cancer is one of those. Now, there are some hospices, because they're large and can afford to do it, they will take patients on, provide them hospice care while they're getting their cancer treatments. Now, Medicare is not going to pay for that, and so they have to have the resources to be able to send the nurses, to send the clinical team. It's called open access, so we'll treat you without you being terminal. And typically what happens, we've learned in most research projects, is as the patient gets toward the end of the treatment regimen, they typically, many of them stop. Let's say that we're going to treat you, give you an 8-step treatment. They stop at 4 steps and said, I'm done. And so if we would be allowed to provide good quality hospice care for them, and they stop, then it becomes seamless. We don't have to stop and do all the paperwork. They're just there with us. Okay, so it's just better care. And then, again, as I mentioned, we hope to do more palliative, treat symptom services before people are hospice appropriate. Okay? And then finally, this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about health. You know, health really is more than the absence of disease. It's care of the whole person, body, mind, soul, relationships. We try not in hospice to let people be defined by their diseases, because people are more than their disease. And unfortunately, sometimes the disease, in terms of identity, takes over the person's human experience. And as I mentioned earlier, that some of the healthiest people in the world are those with terminal illness. And I say that because their body may be failing and their body may be in decline, but their mind and their souls, their spiritual perspective, their relationships are the healthiest they've ever been in their lives. And that's just bizarre. But that's the truth. That the disease, it basically throws away all the reasons for not living life the way you want to live life. And that doesn't mean that patients are stupid or that they do things that they, just kind of throw care to the wind. But it says, I'm going to live life the way I've wanted to, and ironically enough, they get to do that the last 6 months of their life. I want to point out there's a distinction between healing and cure. There's always healing. There may not always be cure. And we have not eradicated death yet from the human experience, and until we do, cure may not be possible, but healing always is. And here's an example of healing. This is a quote from a rabbi. The doctor said he can't cure me anymore. What am I going to do now? Well, I can take an interest in others. I can love. I can have blessings to give and receive. I can have a heightened appreciation of life's gifts. I can feel and express gratitude. I can complete my business. I can trust that God will accompany me through this. That's, I argue, human development. I mean, we see patients who have never been able to forgive their children, who forgive their children. We see patients who have great difficulty communicating, and they communicate because they're suddenly free to do so. And so they're still developing as human beings until they take their last breath. And that's, I think, the message here is that the disease doesn't define the experience, that we can define that and help patients define that and help them live lives even as they're dying. So this is an example, I think, of healing. It may not be a cure, but there's healing. All right, so how can you help? I ask for your help. If you know someone who may qualify for hospice care, please ask them to consider it, because I think it's a very profound way of caring for them. Obviously, they have to be terminal, but you may hear in your family, grandparents may be facing this decision. We'd much rather have you on hospice care for 6 months than have you in your home for 3 days and can't control your pain. But it's a decision the patient has to make. A patient has to say, you know what, I'm not going to go through this horrible cancer treatment anymore because it's just not the quality of life I wanted. That's okay. It's okay if that's the decision they want to make. And if you have a hospice experience, please share it. One of our goals at Hospice Brazos Valley is to get the message to people your age, and so I want to plug this is an unabashed plug for a fundraiser we're going to do, but I think it's August 20th, we're going to have a mud volleyball tournament. And I think that's the week that you all start coming back to school. It's the Slovakic Sausage is our co-sponsor. They're helping us, and it's called Hog Splash, and it's going to be a tournament. pretty much all day. We got vendors, and we got already got a lot of companies that are going to participate. But it'd be a wonderful way for you as young people to come and get the hospice message out. We're going to make you rotate through the hospice tent to learn something about what we do. But it should be a really fun day, and we're going to get all messy and have a great time. So, all right. Finally, one more favor. Never tell anybody you know that hospice is giving up. It's not. That when there's not a cure, there's still hope. There's much that can be done. It's called hospice and palliative medicine. So, thank you very much.